Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Cameron Abbott back on the show. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, nerds? Time to
What
crack
is
open a cold one.
going on? What's new with you, Cam?
Unemployment still sucks.
Yeah. You
Trying
had
to
any
think.
any potential leads at least?
I've had plenty. I've had a lot of leads. That's one thing I will say is that I'm not without job opportunities or leads that I can apply for. So I've been doing a lot of that. I've gotten a ton of leads actually, but as far as interviews go, I've only had one. But we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I know that a lot of places are it's just there's still so much uncertainty over the
Yep.
next couple of months. So places are kind of really taking their time figuring out who's best for their company, but which I can't blame them. They're trying to play the long game. And
Yeah.
when it comes to that, because we have things like the president decided that he didn't like that a bunch of 12-year-olds trolled him into having an enormous rally prepared, and then less than 10,000 people showed up. And so he decided to try to ban the app that they're all big fans of. Because he's petty.
Yeah, I don't think he was really ever trying to ban it. I think he was trying to get it into the hands of his buddies, which is pretty much what he did.
In a way.
It's what the company that just picked up a 20% stake in it or whatever is run by a couple of his high profile donors. So yeah, seems like just the latest in a long never ending stream of corruption kind of bullshit that Donald Trump likes to do.
I know I guess the Waltons are probably Walmart's a publicly traded company, so I don't know. So the 20% stake was picked up by in a pre-IPO by Oracle and Walmart. I guess they're splitting it somehow, the 20%. But
I didn't even see Walmart attached to it. I just saw the Oracle stuff.
Yeah, Oracle will be handling the data stuff, and then as far as other basically just to get another financial partner in, because it looks like Oracle wasn't able to secure all the funding needed for a quote unquote 20%. So Walmart came in as another buyer, because otherwise it would have been to Microsoft, which honestly would have been a really really big get for Microsoft. But it looks like it looked like Oracle and Microsoft were bidding against each other. Oracle brought in Walmart to help them out and share that 20%. And they outbid Microsoft. So that's what it looks like happened. It is what it is. I'm happy that TikTok gets to stay because I like TikTok a lot. I think it's done wonders for mental health for a lot of people. It's been a really great creative outlet for a lot of other people as well. So it's good stuff.
I have very little to say about TikTok, good or bad. I look at it, and more often than not, I roll my eyes, but I also just get that I'm not the target audience of most of those things. So,
now, to be fair, I technically shouldn't be either, but because I was a media student, new media platforms, I eat up like nobody's business.
I mean, you've always been more into meme culture than I have, so
That's true.
I would say it's certainly more in your wheelhouse than mine. I am on the other side of that old fogey line at this point, that I just look at that stuff and I'm like, yeah, that's just one too many things for me to try and bother delving into. Most of the really big ones end up making their way to Twitter or something anyway, so I end up seeing some of that stuff. But yeah, the thing that really shook me a little bit was when I was driving out to grab dinner one night, a week or so ago. I was listening to the radio, and they were interviewing somebody who I didn't catch who it was, but they were amazed by her, skyrocketing career or something, and she's got an album or something already signed, and she's got a big old record deal. And all of this stemming from the fact that she's the 9th most followed person on TikTok per that interview. And in that, she was like, "Yeah, it's crazy," because she was like 19 at the time or whatever, and she only got onto TikTok because her sister already had 1 million followers, and she's like, "Well, if she can do it, I can do it." And I was just like, "I don't. What the hell does that? How? What? Whatever. This is beyond me. I don't understand any of this." And then I imagine the person that I'm talking about is probably that person that got like signed to She's All That, or the remake of She's All That. That they're doing, because I saw that like a day or two later in the Twitter sphere. So yeah, I don't know. So much of it, I'm just like, I don't care about.
Wait,
so
they're
many
remaking
of these things.
She's All That?
Yeah, they're doing like a gender role reversal of She's All That, where it's going to be like a nerdy guy that gets made over, I guess, and seemingly the
She's
female
All That.
star is going to be, yeah.
She's All That. I'm sorry, I was thinking of She's the Man.
Okay.
The Amanda Bynes film.
Yeah, based on 12th Night.
Based on 12th Night. Yeah.
That would be an interesting. They like, She's the Man is already a remake of 12th Night, basically. So
yeah, that's fair.
We're probably due for another one at this point.
But She's All That. I can see them doing a remake of that. Like, they've remade all the '80s films. Now they're working on the '90s films.
Yeah. So anyway, like, TikTok is just one of those things that is beyond me. I don't get it, but yay for those of you that like the app and will get to continue to use it, assuming Walmart and whatnot don't infect it with Walmartness, which of course they will. Anyway,
listen, dude, if there's one thing I know for sure, it's going to take them a long time to break through the ad algorithm that for some reason is just giving me a lot of German ads.
Okay, that's sure. A little bit of housekeeping before we dive into the show proper. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast everywhere you can. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always go support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So let's dive right on in, Cam. We've got a few topics we talked about kind of tackling beforehand. I'll kind of throw it to you to figure out which one you want to really discuss first.
Oh, okay. I don't know, man. Dealer's choice. You choose.
That's what I just pulled for you. I just gave... whatever.
I don't even remember all the topics.
You said you've been playing some Doom Eternal, so let's talk about Doom Eternal then, I guess, first.
Doom Eternal's rad as hell. It's so good. It's so good, dude. It's the like, I'm dying all the time. I just don't care because I'm just having such a good time. Like, the thing about it is, like, without a doubt, like, I'm definitely getting screwed over in some parts of these levels. But like, I really love the way that it's just like, okay, you died, well, do better. It's a very, like, it's a not as punishing version of, like, Dark Souls, which in itself, Dark Souls really was more of a throwback to you died, get good, do better, which is like an older game thing with, like, back on the NES and stuff, and SNES. And so I really feel like they've done such a great job of keeping Doom fresh. Like, Doom, the reboot on PS4 and Xbox One and PC, was phenomenal. But it did feel a little like there were a few things that were just, like, not perfect about it, but it still made it an incredible game. This does so much better gameplay-wise. I will say the soundtrack is not as good as the other soundtrack. It's kind of, like, not repetitive, but it's kind of like it knows what it should be, but it's not really hitting those same notes. Like, the metal is kind of, it's weird because, like, the great thing about Doom, like the Doom reboot, was like this really awesome soundtrack that really mixed, like, orchestral kind of, like, big choir numbers with, like, just really awesome heavy metal. And it feels like they're trying to do the same thing, but it's just not hitting the same way. Something about it's a little bit off.
Yeah, I played Doom Eternal back when it came out, and, like, I've never been the music guy, but I like it's something. I mean, even the first game, like the music is lauded in that, and when I'm playing the game, either Doom 2016 or Doom Eternal, like I get into it, and the music's like it keeps you like pumped and energized, and progressing through the level and stuff. But like it is completely forgettable to me after the fact. Like it's because it's never anything I'm gonna listen to just on a lark, because I'm not just not a metal guy. So it like I haven't thought of the Doom Eternal music since beating the game, and even trying to think back to it now, I'm just like, I mean, I'm sure there's just like loud drums and guitars and stuff like that, and that's boom 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 boom, and that kind of like that vibe to it. And I think an element of kind of what you're speaking to that like I'm reminded of is like just the layout of the levels are so much larger in the game, so it's really hard to like sustain that with the music behind the significantly like upsized level scopes. I think that's certainly something I remember facing and dealing with kind of at the time, was like games like I also had a lot of fun with the game, but it really started to like wear out its welcome for me a lot throughout the game. Like the game was like 3 times longer than I thought it needed to be, and a lot of that came in the level design, where it's like, okay, like every level is like an open world map that I needed to go and like do a whole bunch of like platforming and collecting and stuff like that. And I think they would have benefited from like compartmentalizing those things into smaller chunks, and kind of giving a little bit of break in between some of those things. Like when I'm spending an hour just to get through a level of Doom, I'm like, this is way too long for a level of Doom.
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to that point yet, but like I was surprised that like at the end of this most recent level, so I'm at the point where I'm in the Arctic. I finished
even
the first Arctic level.
Even from the beginning, basically, where it's like like when you get to the end of a level in that game, it's like, okay, you're at the end of the level, so now we've opened up the fast travel so you can go back and do whatever you need to do in any of the other sections. Like, even that right there tells me they know that this level's too big, and you're not going to want to come back in and like replay it from the beginning. So here's your opportunity to go like 100% this level before you leave right now. Like that's something that just immediately jumped out at me, like from the early stages of that game.
I will say, like, I have found the levels to be quite long, but there is something that I love about the like, because I have dash, like I unlocked the dash, and I'm on the Arctic level right now. I'm on the second Arctic level, the Doom Hunter fortress is what I'm kind of going through right now. I think I'm like just towards the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Heading towards the middle of it. But one thing I do love about it is that I don't have to worry about all like 30 different key cards just to move around. That's great. That was my big complaint about Doom 2016 was like, oh cool, I really want to go over there and check this out. Oh, I don't have a key card for it. Like in this one, I feel like the only limitation is like, are you going to risk it for the biscuit? Like, are you going to just like leap off and leap down just to see what's going on down there? Or like, and the way that Dash allows you to just to kind of like, the platforming I feel is really good for what it is, which is a first person shooter with some like very minor puzzle stuff mixed with, because you can go just straight linear and it's not a problem. There's not a lot of problem solving you have to do that way. But they do engage you in a way that I really enjoy. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a great time with it. I'm having a blast. I love the infusion of lore into this, because I felt like Doom 2016, yeah, big surprise.
Yeah.
Doom 2016, I felt like in the codex and stuff had tons of really cool lore that like, for me, as somebody who's played Doom before, like everybody's played Doom 64 before. For me, playing Doom 2016, I was like, wait, so like this Doom Slayer is actually like an important figure, and like he's like been like quote unquote resurrected or like brought out of stasis or whatever the situation is. to like close the portal on Mars. And there's there's some really cool like something going on here, and I'm really delving through some of the lore here, and it's really cool. Like you start off this game in like your own like Doom Slayer fortress, the Slayer like this the Fortress of Slayer or something like that. Like it's like Fortress of Solitude.
Yeah.
Um, and it's cool. I'm loving all like the cool things that I'm going to be able to unlock. Uh, the layout of it is super awesome. It's essentially a floating space castle. It's awesome. Like I'm loving everything about it. I'm loving all the lore. I'm loving that the enemies and the bosses and stuff actually have some like there's something really cool going on with it. And I'm digging it, man. I'm digging it a lot.
Yeah, it's like I couldn't tell you the story of 2016 Doom at all. And admittedly, I couldn't tell you the story of Doom Eternal at all either, having just played it 6 months ago or whatever. But I definitely can remember that there was way more story in Doom Eternal than there was in 2016 Doom. So, like, yeah, I absolutely, like, for a lore nerd like yourself, this game absolutely has way more of that.
Dude,
Versus like
the
me,
Sentinels.
I'm just going in and I'm just like, all right, just let me run around this map and shoot and like, quickly bounce around and like, especially with all the new platforming kind of moves and the dash and all that stuff. Like, how can I, most efficiently and effectively, and because of how they changed the combat up, where like chainsaws will kind of give you one kind of element, and glory kills will give you another, and then shooting kills or whatever will give you like the third, like for your health and shields and your gas basically for your chainsaw. Like you have to kind of like mix and match your kill styles
Mm-hmm.
in that in those like little combat arenas, and so it turns all of them into this weird like first person shooter puzzle element a little bit. And like I remember loving that for the most part. And yeah, just kind of like the cut scenes in between all that or whatever, it was just kind of like, all right, this is just like, very pretty, but also like, I mean, it's like very pretty in the terms of like it's very, high graphical fidelity kind of thing, but it's also like grotesque and like demons and hellscapes and stuff like that. So I'm like, I don't really like, this isn't pleasing for me to look at, so I just kind of want to move past it and move on to back where I'm, running around, jumping around, fighting stuff.
Oh, dude, when you're on that second world, um, and you're there, and you have to like pick up the little Sentinel like canisters to like plug into the like different mech suit parts to like bust your way through the level. So
Mm-hmm.
cool, just so
Yeah.
cool. Like it's just awesome. I love it. Um, I'm just stoked. I think that it's super cool. I'm digging it a lot. I'm really excited to get back to it. Because I was literally 20 minutes late to recording with you because I didn't realize it was after 4 o'clock. Because I was playing.
I wonder what was going on there.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I should probably check the time because like last time I checked the time, it was like after 2, and I checked the
Mm-hmm.
time and it's like 4:20. I was like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember like staying up late nights just playing through and just being like, all right, let me just get through one more level, and then again that level being like another hour and a half, and being like, well, I was not expecting it to be that long. Oops. Um,
Well, dude, I have like 3 canisters to like put into upgrades into my fortress. I'm so stoked.
I forgot about those, or like didn't figure out how to utilize those until like halfway through the game. So like I was playing super underpowered for like a good chunk of that game, and then I was like, oh, that's right, I can go do these things and I can unlock this stuff. Like that's what I've been collecting those things in each world for. Let me go like actually like cash these in. And so like suddenly halfway through the game I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm gonna be super powered up and have like a whole bunch of stuff upgraded and whatnot. um I mean the biggest things I remember about that game though are like I hated the like difficulty spike in the late game of that game, especially because I was playing on like baby ass baby mode, and just like trying to enjoy my time. But then like they introduce one kind of like mini boss somewhere through in the middle of the game, and I don't remember where he's introduced. Have you encountered the Marauders yet?
No, I know that I'm supposed to be like watching out for when they do show up because they're apparently like the worst.
Yeah, I mean, like when they first show up, it's a big moment in the game, and like it basically gets treated like a boss fight kind of thing. And then they're just like suddenly regular enemies that you have to deal with, and but each time it's still like a goddamn boss fight because you have to like have your positioning like perfect, and you have to be like right on the money with like parrying and stuff like that. And it's just like you saying earlier, like, you know, this has that like Dark Souls mentality. I was like, like as soon as you said it, I was like, it's a very played out kind of thing, but it absolutely is like a super fast paced Dark Souls where it's like you can try going through this, but like, you know, you might die, and then it's you know, back to the beginning of the level, or back to, you know, the checkpoint or whatever that, and yeah, it can be incredibly frustrating dealing with that sometimes. But like, beat the game and had a good enough time with it, but it's like, that was, you know, being one of the very first games of the pandemic. It's one of those things like it's so far away now that I completely forgot about it, that that I'd played that this year until you mentioned it. So yeah, 2020. Thanks, Doom. We opened up a real hellscape. So Doom Eternal wasn't really the escape into you know, a hellscape power fantasy that I was looking for. Any final thoughts there on Doom Eternal?
Yeah, I'm just excited to get back to it and play it. So
Cool. Well, I hope you enjoy it, and certainly it sounds like you're going to get more out of it, especially like based on where you're at versus where the game's going to go. There's going to be so much more lore that you're going to gobble up, I'm sure. So enjoy that when it comes. One of the things on my plate, I'll just really quickly, like, my very briefest of brief Avengers updates before we dive into like a next like real topic is I've got the Platinum in Avengers, which was exciting because, as I was bragging to Cam before the show, I'm currently in the top 50 like first achievers on PSN profiles, and we'll see if that sticks. But basically, it was like the patch that went live this last Friday fixed the bugged trophy that like was keeping anybody from getting the platinum. Unfortunately, I downloaded and like played the game post patch right away, and so I ended up picking that up and getting the platinum Friday night. I think it was actually like early Saturday morning or something like that. But somebody described Destiny 2 the other day, or compared it to Destiny 2, of like being the people who play Destiny, or the people who like love Destiny really hate Destiny. I think it was Greg talking about that.
yeah,
And it was like it reminded me of, yes, Destiny, but it is absolutely what I feel about the Avengers right now, where it is like I'm still having enough fun playing the game, but I hate so many things about the game because it's just like so many things are still broken even after they patched like 1,000 fixes. They introduced another big one where it's like, hey, you're supposed to have 2 weekly challenges, but maybe half your character's only loaded with 1. Oops, sorry. And like weekly challenges are the biggest way to kind of move across your battle pass kind of thing. So that was like irksome and frustrating or whatever. But yeah, there's just like a ton of stuff that I hate about that game, but I'm still addicted to it and I'm still playing through it. So that's my Marvel's Avengers update. Sitting there at number 39 on Platinum First Achievers per PSN profiles. So, haha, yay. But one of the bigger real things that I think we can both speak to at least is I just finished watching The Legend of Korra. I'd started watching that back when Avatar came to Netflix. I watched through all of Avatar, and then I was like, okay, I really like that show. I'm interested enough to see, you know, where does Legend of Korra go. This was before I think it had been announced that they were coming to Nickelodeon. So I was like, I bought and watched the first season of it on Amazon, and then I just bought like the Blu-ray of like both shows, but then I never actually got down to sitting down and watching the rest of Korra until it came to Netflix. So now that they're both on Netflix, I have watched both shows and watched Legend of Korra. And while I liked Legend of Korra, I definitely am in the camp of like, I liked Last Airbender better. I liked that like cast of characters better. So much so that like I was still forgetting people's names by the end of season 4 of Korra. from like the core group of people. Like Asami, I just couldn't remember her name, and I felt like terrible about that. Um, so yeah, it's like I just thought, I guess Avatar, the Last Airbender, I think has like such a more fleshed out like supporting cast of characters throughout the series that like come in and come and go, versus Korra that I just thought was like there were a couple here and there that like came in for an episode and then would come back, but for the most part it was like yeah, it was more built around like the season long arcs of that show. So I enjoyed it, but it was a little bit more just lackluster, I guess, as what I was expecting from a follow up to the Last Airbender. Cam, what are your thoughts on Korra?
I mean,
you said you have many thoughts. So.
I do. I think that you're totally right. I know a lot of people really love Korra, especially in the last season, like last 2 seasons.
I liked the final season where she's like really kind of having to come back from being broken. Like that was when I liked Korra the most.
Yeah.
Up until that point, I just thought Korra was like incredibly headstrong, and just she was like everybody, it seemed like, was trying to say, hey, maybe this isn't the best way to approach it, but she was being stubborn and would like approach it the wrong way and then have to like learn from that mistake herself instead of people trying to like she wasn't listening to her friends. And the kind of running thing between her and oh, here we go again, Mako, of like, why are you taking his side? And Mako's like, I'm not taking sides. Like it was always frustrating because almost every time it felt like Mako was, saying the right things, or at least like the things I was identifying as like the correct choices, and Korra just kind of kept trying to brute force her way through things.
Yeah, no, it's Korra. I've always really liked her character because I feel like it represents, like, people don't just change one way to another way overnight. Like, it takes Korra's progress and her really coming into being a much more thoughtful and developed person takes time, and it slowly is about like wearing away from her. Like, for me, it's like I like that they don't go from like, well, season 1 she's real headstrong, well, now she's not headstrong at all in season 2. She's just less headstrong. She does take time to think about things more, but she still falls into old personality traits, old personality habits, which I felt was like a really realistic way to portray somebody who, like, eventually it takes her getting broken down to her very like base form, like base self, to kind of rebuild herself back up and be more like, and really commit herself into being much more of a thoughtful person, and somebody who thinks more about their actions before they commit to them. um, I just like that progress that gets made with her and how she does it, but like I hear where you're coming from on it for sure. Especially with the supporting cast. Like, and this is kind of an issue that does come from the writing, like people who were behind the writing this time, like for Korra, versus how many people were involved in the writing of Avatar: The Last Airbender. People really don't understand that the Avatar: The Last Airbender had some of the best like writers that a kids or like a young adult television show has ever had. Mike and Brian are really good, I feel, at really developing a world, and kind of like, if it's just the prime like main story beats, like season 1, condensed, just straight set of episodes, it's the main story plot through all the way through. If that's what's going on, they're really good at storytelling. But when you get these longer seasons where you have like in between episodes, between like the major plot points, that are usually done and used to develop characters, they're not great at that. They really struggle with helping to develop side characters where in in Avatar: The Last Airbender, you have Emmy award winning writers. You have like award winning writers who are part of this staff and are like and have written some of the best episodes. Some of the best episodes, some of people's favorite episodes, aren't even written by Mike and Brian. A lot of people's favorite episodes aren't written by Mike and Brian. Like the real good character developing episodes for that are outside of the main plot line are done by other people. And so you don't get that in Legend of Korra. And it does suffer because of it. A prime example I always point to is Mako. After season 2, Mako's character never changes. He never has any development. And his season 3 final fight against the Waterbender makes very little to zero sense because it's very clear at the end of that fight that he could have done that at any point during the fight. And him not doing it earlier than that is literally just because like they wanted the fight to go longer for animation purposes. His character, like he never, like he literally does a kill shot right away, like he does a lightning kill shot on this waterbending gal, and it's like you could have done that at any point during your fight, Mako.
Yeah.
But it's like so Mako is developed to, and it's really because they wrote him into a corner at the end of season 2. At the end of season 2, and I have a Twitter thread that I wrote about this actually not too long ago. That like nobody apparently saw, which great. I'm happy about that because it's kind of. Did you see it?
I saw it, and Logan and I even talked about it on something, or it might have just been like before we started recording because like we both commented to each other about it, and it was one of those things of like I saw he had a thread. And then I saw how long the thread was and decided I'm not going to go through and look at this thread.
Good.
Was kind of, I think, both of our sentiments on that.
I literally went through end of season 2 to the end of Legend of Korra. Like, I basically did a rewrite on Mako's plotline.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, glad I didn't do it then because I had not seen all that stuff yet. So it would have been spoilersy.
I put spoilers up at the top. Like, this will be a very spoiler thing. So basically, now that you finished it, though, like, essentially, at the end of Season 2, Mako has basically done everything, quote-unquote, the right thing as far as, like, being a cop and being a quote-unquote, respectable citizen of Republic City. At the beginning of Season 2, he makes, quote-unquote, the right decisions, tells the president about what Korra's planning, yada yada, all this stuff. And it looks like, okay, yeah, no, that looks really good for Mako. And then Mako gets screwed by the system. All of his previous quote-unquote allies that he had in the institutions of Republic City turn their back on him because it's no longer politically viable to, because he's trying to discover what's really going on and what the truth is, and he's being put up against Varric, and Varric is essentially using politics and corruption to basically frames him for terrorism at one point.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, it's just in the grand scheme of things, even just talking about that in season 2 in context compared to like the end of the show, and just in this conversation surrounding Mako, it's like it's weird realizing that Varric's going to get more character development throughout the rest of the series than Mako does.
Yeah, it's really messed up. Don't get me wrong, I love Varric's character development. I think it's great. But Varric frames Mako for terrorism at one point. And Mako basically tells Bolin, it's a very good brother moment, character moment for these two brothers. Really more on Bolin's side of things, to basically be like, Bolin, open your eyes and actually look at things as how they are. And it's great, Mako's realized that, the system doesn't work. And then at the end of season 2, he just goes back to being a cop. He has been betrayed by the system. He knows the system doesn't work. He knows that the people at the top don't actually care about people on the streets and all around. But he goes back to being a cop. And in any other cop movie, any other movie that would or show that would do this, it would end with Mako turning down, going back to being a cop.
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't. And Mike and Brian essentially buy into this police culture ideology, and it's like Mako, and they just turn Mako into RoboCop from there on out, and it sucks, and it really sucks because his character never really goes anywhere else. In season 4, they literally don't know what to do with him, so they just make him a bodyguard to the Earth King,
Yeah.
and he does nothing. He just piss all for almost the entire season until the very end. And like I put out there, like at the and sorry everybody, there's just a lot of spoilers going on here for Legend of Korra. At the end of season 4, I felt like I'm like, oh, this is what they're going to do. They set up this big goodbye for Mako so that he would like when he sacrifices himself to stop the machine, like that'll be a way to like take care of his character because otherwise his character's literally done nothing this entire series or this entire season. And sure enough, they just have Bolin pop back up and grab him and pull him back down.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, what? Like,
yeah, I remember thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, that's not a move I was expecting him to make in a kids show of like him, doing the big sacrifice, and then so when a minute later Bolin pops into frame and grabs him, I was like, okay, yeah, that's more like it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so you had this entire like big setup for him basically being like, I serve the people of Republic City. Sure, that's what you want to do with it. Fine, go with it. But then for it, like, just to like hit, it means he does nothing except at the very end he does like a, hey, always got your back, Korra. I'm always on your side. Like fist bump. Like what? It's so
Yeah.
dumb. It's so dumb. And so I have a Twitter thread where I basically just framed it as like, this is what happens. Mako quits a police force. I'm like, he has the backstory for it. He has the backstory of Batman. Just make him Batman. Like, he has underworld connections with his previous time working with the gangs, like the Triple Triad. He has, like, he understands and fundamentally now knows how the upper echelons and political system works. He has a Sami to basically be his, like, Fox slash Alfred slash, like, just, like Catwoman, like, partner to help him out. And, like, so it's, like, like, this vigilante has all this futuristic technology, and it's all stuff that Asami knows how to put this stuff together. Like, it would have been such a cool season 3 plot thread about Mako essentially at the end of season 3, it like he essentially is like wanted because of stuff that he does during season 3. That leads to him essentially like for the setup for season 4 would be that he is in the Earth Kingdom not helping out the army, but really doing more of a like vigilante approach. And so he's like a big person who, instead of it just being randomly Opal has heard about the concentration camps going on with Kuvira's army, instead Mako is the one who has like witnessed it and like broken people out of them and like tells people about what's been going on there. So you have like actual first eye account witnessing of it versus just like a rumor. And then that's really puts Bolin in an even tougher spot because his brother is essentially has admitted that he is no longer needed to be framed for like quote unquote terrorism or freedom fighting, whatever. But he basically admits that he's been sabotaging Kuvira's army to Bolin's face, and Bolin has to make like decisions at that point, like, do I trust my brother or do I trust like my girlfriend or do I trust my my superiors in the military? And like that would be a really cool plot thread, and then you have just more of that going on. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on in that Twitter thread that I put out there. If you are more interested in it, check it out. But otherwise, like I just was like, oh, Mako's trending because people are watching Legend of Korra, and people were like, Mako sucks. It's like, yeah, he does suck, and he didn't have to. Asami didn't have to be boring for 2 seasons. Bolin's beautiful and wonderful, and they did a lot of really good stuff with him over the course of the series. I cannot.
I think like Bolin gets like the best kind of like arc across the whole thing.
Oh,
Like
the entire
I
series,
I
yeah,
don't
100%.
I,
Bolin's
I don't
awesome.
like that like season 4 kind of resets him a little bit and just makes him like naive again, considering everything else he'd been through. But whatever, he at least comes out the right side of it.
Yeah, and like it's he's also choosing to. It's not that he's naive; it's that he's choosing to be a naive. He's choosing not to see things, because if he chooses not to see things, then he gets to be proud of what he's been doing. Also, he's been in like this military outfit for like a year. So
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's I think you're giving him agency that's not there.
that's fair. That's totally
I
fair.
don't think he's like making a conscious choice to like ignore stuff. He's just not like I think he isn't paying attention to the world around him. He's in that like bubble. He's basically lost in his own echo chamber there. I don't think he's actively like
That's true.
saying I'm not going to try and like dig deeper until basically like his relationships are pressured because of it, and that's when he actually digs. I mean the whole time jump that you get in that final season of like skipping ahead a few years. I was like, oh, it's interesting. I'm curious how much we'll like get to see, those moments that led up to now 3 years later, and you really don't. Like it's handled a little bit through like like Korra gets a little bit of flashback kind of movement
It's
here and there,
bad.
but
Like let's be real. The time skip could have been really awesome. It was not executed as well as it could have, but at the same time, it was not executed so poorly it ruined the show.
yeah. Um,
Once again,
yeah,
it
I
comes
like
down to the limitations of the creators as writers, and instead of like bringing together, like even if it was just like, hey, let's get the old team back together, or bring in new writers to kind of like deal with it differently, they didn't do that either way. And so instead you get a lot of episodes that actually don't mean anything and don't do anything. And it's unfortunate.
yeah, like ultimately I feel like I I'm trying to think. Like, I probably liked the Zahir. Like, I like Zahir best as a bad guy, as a villain. Well, I don't know. Maybe whoever the first season was.
Amon.
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't rewatch that season. So that one's a little more foggy in my mind.
I like Amon
But
the
like the
best
whole.
personally, just because the mystery behind like him using blood bending to basically mimic spirit bending is really really cool.
See, I
So
didn't get like I got that he was a bloodbender, but to me it was just he also figured out spirit bending and able to be able to take people's powers away.
oh no,
Um,
it was blood bending. Essentially, he did some like blood bending in people's like in the blood vessels in their like around their chakras to essentially seal their chakras.
oh, that's right, because they do like people do get their powers back right at the end.
Yeah, the Korra
Yeah,
Korra uses spirit bending to unlock people's chakras, so they get their bending back.
yeah, okay,
That's such a cool concept that like he mastered bloodbending to the point where he could actually shut off blood flow to people's chakra points in their bodies. Like that's just unbelievably cool. Amon is, and also he's voiced by Stephen Blum, so he has that awesome like veteran voice actor as his voice.
hmm
And then like the way it go, everything about Amon, in my opinion, is season one to me of Korra is the best season because it's the most point to point, like no bad episode season. There's no there's no fat. There's good character development throughout the entire thing. You have some you have a little bit of everything, whether it's action, romance, drama, thriller, because there's that entire episode where Korra confronts the Equalist by herself, and Amon just like taunts her and tortures her and gets into her head, and it's
yeah,
great. Like there's so much about that entire season that is just beginning to end solid, perfect. That when you get into the longer seasons, you lose that. You lose a lot. You get a lot more fat that actually. And once again, I mentioned it earlier. You get episodes that literally don't do anything for the plot and don't do anything for character development. They're just episodes for episode's sake because they had to fill an order, and it's unfortunate.
yeah. I think I like the Zahir plot line because
Oh, the
especially
yeah.
again like diving into just kind of like spoiler stuff, like once they're introduced as like the Order of the Red Lotus as a spin-off of the White Lotus,
Hmm.
having loved the White Lotus and the idea behind it in the first series, I like that like this is the corruption of that, and of course you would get that, and the idea, like the least believable thing about it was that like everybody suddenly gets these airbending powers and he immediately is a master of them and can deal with like immediately get this jailbreak going for himself. I was like, that's not really believable or whatever, but
Oh, I
once
thought they explained it pretty well though.
I mean, like they explain it away as like he's always admired airbending or whatever, like he'd known that
Oh
culture.
no,
But
when they talk about him, I think you might have missed it, or you might not be remembering it all the way. When they talk about him, they mention that he didn't just admire the air nomads. He literally practiced air nomad katas as like, and he used air nomad like he used airbending as a martial art without having airbending abilities. So he used and it goes back to the reason why I know this and I'm into this is because um, the four bending styles are based off of actual martial arts,
hmm
and the martial art that airbending's based off of, essentially the way airbending operates, even if you don't have the ability to airbend, it's a martial art. And so the idea was for Zahir is that he practiced airbending as a martial art to essentially just be like somebody with that prowess, and because of that he was a effective like anti-bending fighter, like
mm.
like some of the
Okay.
equalists were. So instead of using like chakra points or like the pinpointing with the that Ty Lee does and the equalists do,
hmm
he'd use that same kind of tactics, but instead of like pinpointing people, he would use airbending maneuvers to essentially physically bring people down and bring benders down. So they mentioned that even without airbending, he still used these forms to like incredible effectiveness, and to the point where he unlocks airbending for himself. He is that masterful with it, and because he's like they mentioned that he's read scrolls and texts and tomes from the air nomads. So like when he starts using airbending to in like really creative ways, like to suffocate people, it's like what would happen if somebody who's not an air nomad learned airbending and then decided to use it to like take people's lives, something that air nomads were totally against. And it's like it really talks a lot about like the potential airbending had that never really got utilized because of the respect for life that air nomads had, and it kind of like Zahir is kind of the anti Aang. And it's really cool. Zahir's such a great villain. He is such a great villain. I think that that's actually something that Korra has over. I mean, maybe not even over Last Airbender, because Last Airbender has phenomenal villains as well. And I guess it's just conceptually like they really know how to make really well developed, awesome villains.
Yeah, I guess like Last Airbender very much has like the one really overarching villain, like or two villains being the Fire Lord family, effectively,
Yeah.
versus each season of Korra very much being centered around like this is the big bad for this season. But yeah, I the just the all the Zahir stuff and like him kind of like bringing together his Ocean's 11 of bad guys, all of them having been like in these very elaborate prisons themselves. I thought was like it was a lot of cool jailbreak sequences basically, and then
Oh,
I kind
totally.
of I enjoyed the cat and mouse game that he was playing with Korra for a lot of it. I thought he was the most effective at really kind of like taking her down, and then obviously you see that in how kind of it affects her in going into season 4. I thought like the ending of that little bit of like the two of them re-meeting again in season 4, I was like, I whatever.
They try to make
It
it.
was
They try to
like,
make a Hannibal Lecter moment, and it just doesn't work.
yeah, yeah, but So yeah, like overall, like I enjoyed Korra, but I think like if I ever am have the urge to go back and like enjoy the series again, I'll like Last Airbender is the one I will jump into. I also like I never really like I know like time wise what it's been like 70 years has passed between the two shows, and given the revolution the industrial revolution and stuff, like technologically sure all that stuff could have made those leaps, but I could just never get above like, or I could never get past the like in a single generation or two, like how different the world changed between the two shows. Like it was always just a weird disconnect for me. Like if it had been a couple generations away or a couple avatars away, like I would have bought it a little bit more, I guess. But the fact that it was like, yeah, like Aang was still going like saving the world 20 years ago or whatever, and now there are giant cities, like Republic City, in existence. I was just like,
Well, I think that
maybe
comes
not.
into the idea of like what happens when, because the original idea that not Ozai, Sozin had was, you look at what the Fire Nation had. Like the Fire Nation had tanks, they had airships, they had more advanced technology than the other nations did. And it comes down to, well, what would happen if a city like Republic City, which is a city where every culture and every nation can come and basically just be equals with each other. Because in the comic, Republic City is founded on the original Fire Nation colony. That by the time Zuko and Aang ended the war, they were going to basically just pull the Fire Nation out of all of these colonies. But with the original colony, what they found was that because it was 100 years, like the level of equality for Earth Kingdom citizens had risen because of things like intermarriage. Like the governor of the colony literally was in an intermarriage with an earthbender and had children with her. And so you have this multicultural thing happening where it was that colony alone was already more advanced than any other place in the Earth Kingdom. And the idea became was, well, what if we stop, like, now that we're not at war with each other, what if the Fire Nation shares its technology with everybody? What happens when the scholars of Ba Sing Se, like the university that Ba Sing Se, and these like cultural like centers all come together from all different parts of the world and have a place where they can live and thrive? And that's what Republic City became. Well, what happens with, that the energy from lightning is energy and it can be harnessed and it can be put into stuff. Well, what if we build capacitors to build on like that can contain that? What happens when, and it really goes deeper and deeper into this, in like this industrial, it's not just an industrial revolution, but it was a massive cultural revolution too. So Republic City within, because Aang lived for like almost like he lived for like 80 years after like he lived from being a 12 to 14-year old to being in his 80s. Um because Katara, she's alive still, but she's ancient. Like her kids are in there, like her youngest kid is in his 40s, and like her oldest is 60. So you have like this like why like it's been a long enough period of time where if you take the idea of like a cultural and technological revolution, because they were already at like 1900s level technology between tanks and airships and other stuff like that. So for me, it's totally believable.
Yeah, it's that those things were existing alongside like every city that they go through in Avatar apart from like Ba Sing Se and the like Fire Kingdom capital are like what, like 15 huts or something like that. So it's
That's
just that like
mostly in the Earth
wild.
Kingdom, and that's a point of the Earth Kingdom that they make in season 3 and 4. That because the Earth Kingdom's so large, there's massive like disproportionate living in places.
Yeah, I mean it's just a like it all felt anachronistic to me.
That's fair.
Just because of how it all shook out, and the like the mentality that you're describing behind it of like, oh, it's all of these cultures finally coming together. What I was like, if it had been presented like that in a better way, maybe I'd buy more into it. But the way it's presented in the show is Asami's dad and Varric were like, just geniuses and technological geniuses, and took, the kind of drawings from kind of that Earth Kingdom, or that the guy that moved into the air temples or whatever, and was building the blimps and all that stuff. He just kind of like, leveled them up to get cars and more, active airships and stuff.
What
like
if
that.
I?
Like
What if I
it
told
feels
you,
like
Trevor,
it was built around a pair of people,
Trevor,
as
what if I
opposed
told
to
you it's
this insanely deep lore that you're
Yeah.
pulling from every other source on the subject
fair.
that is not presented here.
that's 100% accurate and true and totally understandable? What if I told you it's in a couple of comic books?
That's exactly what I expect. But yeah, I like.
You don't want to know
It-
what
it
happens
always-
to Zuko's mom. It's not good.
I mean, I figured as much.
It's not well
I
written.
did,
It's
like,
bad.
every time, the like characters from the first show kind of like pop up and make their appearances. That was like a nice little feel good kind of like, oh yay.
When Zuko shows up and he's like old man Zuko riding a dragon,
Yeah,
so sick.
that was nice. Even Iroh, like meeting Iroh in the spirit world, I was like, yay, Iroh.
And then
Because
General
Iroh ends
Iroh?
up being, General Iroh being introduced, getting like the name check at the end of the first season, was a nice little like nod to the lineage, but then actually like meeting Iroh in the spirit world was and him getting to meet Korra was nice, and same with Toph when she kind of finally makes her appearance.
Toph was
enjoyed
the
that little
worst parent ever, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which, I mean, which tracks based on what we know of her from the first show. It's like, yeah, that she didn't have like a good upbringing to model off of, so like she's absolutely going to be like a trash parent.
She totally turned into her dad as a parent.
I don't think she would turn into, because her dad was like just overprotective.
That's true.
She was just aloof and was like. I mean, they
didn't even
go
tell
into
her
it like
daughters who their parents' names were. Like,
the
their dad-
pendulum swung way too far
That's
the
right.
other way.
That's right.
Basically, is what the issue with Toph was. But I did appreciate that, like, where she kind of settles, and how in tune she gets with the Earth. Like, I appreciate that she like makes mention to like she was always watching them and like still like looking over them and knowing what was going on between them. So like she definitely cared. She just is terrible at showing it, just like she was terrible at showing affection and stuff in the first series. So like she felt the most consistent across the generations. And I also appreciated that she kind of excused why Katara really wasn't more involved in the show, kind of giving the line of like, this is why Katara wasn't out there fighting in your civil war. We're old. Like, we have to leave this to your generation now. It was a nice little a nod to all that. But yeah, I like overall, like, I still enjoyed it. It definitely went way more into like Mecha Gundam territory than I was expecting at the end, but I was like, all right, whatever, sure. So yeah, Legend of Korra, good show. Check it out if you have listened to this. I mean, like, we definitely spoiled some things, but we also kept like a lot of stuff just kind of vagarisms that like we will get talking about it in the know. But if you haven't watched the show, it's still something there's still something there for you. You can definitely glean from it. So throw it back over to you, Cam. You wanted to talk about Cyberpunk 2077 and kind of the latest news from Cyberpunk. Obviously, like, we're not playing the game or anything like that, but you just kind of wanted to share some Cyberpunk thoughts.
Yeah, Night City Wire, which is their like regular update that they've been doing. Usually, like, if you go back and watch them on YouTube, they have a ton of information about the game, about kind of like different things going on in it. The one before this this most recent one, they went into like kind of like the backgrounds that your character can have. You can choose one of three backgrounds between nomad, uh, corpo, and street. So the idea is essentially Night City. For people who don't know, Night City is a city that's between San Francisco and LA in the kind of Pacifica area. And it was built by a guy who essentially turned it into a corporate wonderland. And it's a massive city that is run by several corporations, but the real foundation of it is outside in the like what's been going on in the world is the world's kind of fallen apart in a lot of different ways. It's now the new United States, and a lot of other stuff has happened, a lot of wars and stuff. And by 2077, you you can come from a background where like you were a quote unquote nomad, which means you lived on the outskirts of cities like Night City or other major metropolitan areas, and so you're part of for whatever, they haven't really revealed too much about the background, but essentially for one reason or another your old family that you ran with as a nomad is gone, and now you're coming to Night City. If you're street, it means that you literally grew up on the streets of Night City. Your block is like where you are very inundated with the people and the like gangs and everything that are going on there. And then if you're a corpo, you start the game off as a corporate fixer who is essentially fallen from grace and is trying to like climb their way back up. And it's really, really cool. The backgrounds alone make the game really interesting to start off with. But recently, the most recent one that they did was about the gangs. And the gangs are like, there's tons of different gangs. You have like a quote unquote ultra nationalistic patriotic gang. You have a Latin street gang. You have some triads. You have some just a lot of different stuff. I highly suggest anybody who's interested in the game and wants to know more about it now versus later, check out the live Night City wires. They're super cool, really well done, and oftentimes not too long either. So just wanted to give a massive shout out to that process, that program that they're doing, and then talk about the game because I'm stoked as hell for it.
Yeah, it's I kind of half caught this week or this night wire because I was working on some other stuff for work while it was going on, so I wasn't too tuned into it apart from hearing they're diving into all the gangs, and they were showing really how much of a lived-in world Night City is, and a lot of people were throwing around like it being the Grand Theft Auto kind of effect, and some of the stuff I did see though was especially coming out of it was just how, especially on the heels of Twitch's tone deaf Hispanic Heritage Month, being hey, let's throw in maracas and sombreros and guitars onto emotes. A day or two after that, Cyberpunk throws out all of these very these very ethnically based gangs, with each gang being a different ethnicity, being very stereotypical, a little too much stereotypical on that side of things. And I looking at it, barring that context, definitely looks like it could be better. And it's one of those things, I recognize CD Projekt Red as a Polish company, which is going to be 99% white people on their teams, I'm sure. And so trying to do something with diversity in this way is at least a step up from The Witcher being, just bereft of any kind of something that isn't just white guys. But looking at some of those things, I was I feel like you guys missed the mark a little bit. If trying to be actually representational, I mean, and this has been a an issue with Cyberpunk since like the first trailers we were seeing, where the guy that you're walking around with was like aggressively Hispanic stereotype, talking about like calling everything pendejo and stuff like that, and seeing like my non-white friends basically like commenting and being like annoyed by these things. I'm like, I get it. That's like, yeah, they don't get a pass for that just because this is going to be one of the big ambitious games. They should be held to task just like anybody else that we would expect more out of this. So it's like it's trying to like marry those worlds or look at them and just realize like it's not going to be the best look, and I'm trying to just kind of like prepare myself for that more so, I guess, because yeah, it was a little rough seeing some of that stuff come out.
As far as the gangs and goes with ethnicities and stuff, I can see that, but at the same time I felt like, I don't know, it comes down to neither of us have really any right or authority to speak on race.
Yeah, and that's why I'm basically just trying to voice the criticisms that I'm seeing from my friends that are Hispanic or of Asian heritage or whatnot, that are kind of like I'm echoing their comments on this, because yeah, like as a white guy, I look at this stuff and I look at it and I'm like, that looks like it's playing way too into the wrong one note of these kinds of like iconography, and so when that is reinforced by the people that are being represented there, I'm just trying to kind of really raise up their voices a little bit.
No, for sure, and I appreciate that. I will say that outside of a lot of like the kind of like one note stereotypical stuff, I found all the gangs super cool. Like, is there a little bit like Latin, like Spanish slang being thrown around by the Latin gang? Sure. Is that that the kind of like all black gang is an all Haitian gang? Being like is that like there's these one note stereotypes that are going on a little bit, but then I felt like what these gangs are about and what they do and kind of like the things that make each gang special. You could apply whatever kind of coding you wanted on that, but the fact that like each gang is special, that there is something unique about them, and it's not just, and it's like it's deeper than kind of the racial connotations and the racial factor about it. That's kind of what I pulled more away from. But at the same time, like, these criticisms do need to be leveled at it. Like, I don't think they get a pass just because the gangs are cool, that they can, be throwing around a lot of extra Spanish just for the sake of it, of trying to be quote unquote more authentic.
Yeah.
Like, it would be bad enough if it was an American company, and it's just as bad, if maybe a little bit less, because it's a Polish company. CD Projekt Red is literally on another continent from where these people are from. But at the same time, like, I'm not giving them a pass on it, because I don't think there should, like, I certainly do not have the say to, like, I can't come from a place to say, well, I'll give them a pass on it. As a white guy, I felt very represented by this, like, ultra nationalistic gang that was shown there.
Yeah, to me it comes down to, especially in light of like Ghost of Tsushima recently, and the lengths that it would seem Sucker Punch went to be respectful of kind of that culture and the depictions that they were making of a culture other than their own, compared to what CD Projekt Red has or hasn't done. And obviously, like, we don't have a scope necessarily of like how deep into Americana they've really delved into for this, but it definitely, like, it seems to be playing way more on stereotypes than like very deep nuanced kind of like
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was trying. Yeah.
ethnocentric kind of conversations that are happening. So I wish it were better, but also I didn't go in expecting it to be better from
Thank you. That's
a company that doesn't understand that. Yeah.
That's very much what I was trying to say. That's what I was trying to. I'm like, what's the way that I'm trying to say this? I don't expect better from 3D Project Red, because they're a European country, etc. But like, I'm still gonna be like, you guys still could have done more about it. Yeah.
Cool. Then kind of like, I mean, I still very much am planning on picking it up.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, no. Is this a criticism that I'll have while I'm playing the game? Probably.
Yeah, and it is one because technically, because I got because I'm a sucker for these kinds of things, and I purchased this, I don't know, months ago. I'm like tapping on the box for it right now. My Xbox One X, that was the Cyberpunk one that they released basically when they originally were supposed to release the game. And included in that is a copy of Cyberpunk 2077. So I already technically own the game basically, and will eventually play it on up-resed, hopefully on my quote unquote fingers crossed, hopefully Xbox Series X, assuming I'm able to get a pre-order this coming week. But yeah, it's definitely one of those. I'm like, I look forward to playing the game.
Did you get the PS5?
I got a PS5 pre-order as well. Yeah, and the only reason I'm currently not planning on playing CD Projekt or Cyberpunk on my PlayStation is because I kind of already own it on Xbox.
Yeah.
But I might end up switching that and getting a PlayStation version myself anyway. But yes, I was able to get a PlayStation pre-ordered.
I did not, not because I didn't try, or no, not because I tried and couldn't get one, but because I'm unemployed.
Yeah, smart choice for you. I applaud the not risking throwing yourself into debt over a case of FOMO or something like that.
The FOMO was quite real, but at the same time,
yeah,
the reality, whenever I felt the FOMO, I was like, well, this is just motivation, and I went to go look for a job.
There you go. You got that. I mean, plus there will be plenty of opportunities to continue getting the systems, and as you know, a lot of people have kind of pointed out, it's not really needed as a day one thing unless you really want to be the early adopter and you want to jump on the new tech and all that stuff. Because most of the big games people are looking forward to playing are going to continue to be available on the PS4 for the time being. And obviously, we've already known it's going to be the same with the Xbox side of things for a while here. But yeah, I was able to. I missed the first couple things that went out, but eventually, Amazon released kind of pre-orders at midnight, and I was able to nab one of those. And then I also got the invite from Sony, that email. So Friday morning, I picked up one through them, and since I expect that one to actually be way more likely to get to me, I went ahead and canceled my Amazon order an hour before Amazon sent out the email saying hey, heads up, we might not be able to get these to you on launch day. I was well, haha, screw you, Amazon. I had already canceled my order from you. So yes, I currently have a PS5. I'm going the disc version. One of the things, I might try and pitch it to Logan to discuss this on this week's That News You Care About. One of the things I'm trying to think about with both systems really kind of heading in a discless direction this year, or this generation, is going to be what do collector's editions look like? Because I'm a sucker for those. I have the Ghost of Tsushima one here. I have the Last of Us Part 2 one near me. The Avengers one. I am a sucker for collector's editions.
Oh, collector's editions of the game. Oh, okay, I thought you were talking about the collector's
of the game. Yes.
I'm like,
no.
How do you have
no,
they
not
didn't even do anything special for those
systems.
consoles?
No. Sorry, not of the systems.
Because I know you have the Spider-Man PS4 Pro.
I do. I have the Spider-Man, and I have the $500 million or not $500 million, the 500 million unit limited edition PS4 Pro as well. That one's still sitting in its box somewhere. But yeah, it's the collector's editions of games. It's trying to figure out when God of War 2 comes out with a collector's edition, is that going to include a physical copy of the game, or is it going to be digital only? And what's that going to look like? And or are they going to have to do both because they're going to have a section of their audience now that can't play physical copies of the games because they bought the discless PS5. So like it's definitely a thing. I'm curious to see how some of that starts shaking out here in the coming generation. But anyway, all that said, I wanted to kind of circle it back around to the last little topic of the show to dive into. Well, I do have, so I'm gonna throw a couple things out here related to Super Mario All-Stars, Super Mario 3D All-Stars, because I've started playing that a little bit, and they might be some of the hottest takes that I've ever had. One of which is not as hot, really, but like fuck Nintendo for like this shitty port of these games. They like I'm so thoroughly annoyed by how little effort they put into these remasters, or because they're not remasters, they are just straight up ports. They are the laziest amount of the laziest amount of work that could have been put into them. None of which made the games better. The fact that if I want to play Super Mario Galaxy, I still have to use like motion controls. I have to like move my Pro Controller around to act as the cursor for that game instead of just letting me use one of the analog sticks. Really? Is infuriating. If you're playing it on handheld, you don't have to use motion controls, but you have to use the touchpad basically to try and like get the bits and stuff, which also doesn't work well because players don't have three hands where you're using one hand for moving Mario, one hand for jumping, and then a third hand to collect bits on your screen. So like it is the worst possible way to play that game now. And it's infuriating. And things like coming out I've played a little bit of 64 and I've played a little bit of Galaxy. I've not gone into Sunshine yet because I don't have anything to compare that against myself because I never played that one. But having to come out of every collecting a star in either game and it saying like, hey, congratulations on getting this star. Do you want to save and continue, save and quit, or continue without saving? Like, having to select that every time is not a thing I should be having to do for a game in 2020. Like, any kind of competent port would have just, like, added autosaving. I don't know why, in the first place, those options were ever really in the games, why you wouldn't want to save after getting a star, but whatever. But the fact that that every time you hop out, you have to just click through this menu, and specifically in Galaxy, you have to use the motion control to click save, is just so agonizingly frustrating. But the real hot take is Super Mario 64 is not a fun game to play in 2020. I am not having a good time with this game at all because the controls and specifically the camera angles just are so abhorrently outdated that I am just like, and like this is something that has been building a little bit because I felt this when I like replayed the N64 version a handful of years ago, and felt like, yeah, this doesn't really feel all that fun anymore, and it's just being completely reinforced here where I'm not dying because of like the enemies in the world of Mario. I'm dying because of camera angles, and I'm dying because of bad the very slippery mechanics of Mario running. There's a lack of tightness to him that just doesn't feel fun, and it's infuriating when I like try and head in a direction, and because of the camera angle or because of the movement of the character, I just jump off the map instead of jumping onto the thing that I was trying to jump onto. Is just I'm hating it so much, so I'm probably not going to stick around with it too much. I might dive into Sunshine a little bit just to see what that game was like, but I don't expect it to be good either. So, yeah, just not having a fun time with Mario here in 2020. So, there's my hottest of hot takes. Up there with my Breath of the Wild is a bad game take.
I don't think that. So when it comes to, especially when it comes to saying like Mario 64 doesn't play well, I think that's an opinion that a lot of people have had for a while. For the time that it came out, like Mario 64 was a launch title. Forgive me if I'm incorrect, but I believe it was a launch title for the N64.
Yes, yeah,
Which means like a lot of original games for the N64 and PlayStation 1 um, did not really fully utilize the like. There were limitations to the early games because you're dealing with what like everything they were trying to deal with at the time, especially with the 64. You know, the entire setup for it. So like the camera doesn't work well by today's standards. Not at all. The camera barely worked well then.
I think for the time,
Yeah.
it was groundbreaking, and it was using the N64 and the control scheme behind it. You know, it was unheard of, unseen kind of thing. It definitely changed the game there. But games have gotten so much better, and so it's like if this game had been remade a little bit to the point where instead of the camera being like we're going to move on like 30-degree angles or whatever around you, making it like a fluid thing that you can just control with one of the analog sticks, would have made the experience infinitely better than it is. But it's still like this port is still locked into those janky camera angles from 20 years ago. And that's the issue, is 20 plus years ago. That's my issue with the game, is that it in the same way. Well, I've been comparing it a lot in my mind to the Mega Man Legacy Collection, because the Mega Man Legacy Collection put a shit ton of work into trying to make those games, you know, to celebrate the lineage of the history by adding a whole bunch of like, you know, concept art and stuff behind that for each of those games, but then adding elements that make those games a little bit more playable nowadays, like the quick save features and stuff like that. But much like what I said when the Legacy Collection came out, is if Mega Man 2 was released today as like a brand new game without Mega Man's history, it would get laughed out of the Steam stores because of how glitchy and buggy and problematic it is. And I feel very much the same way about Super Mario 64. If this was launched today as a new game, it would, like, everybody would just be tearing it apart. And like it's not fun to play in the context of this year, comparing to stuff like the Resident Evil remakes that we've been getting in the last couple of years. Like there's work that could have been done and put into these games to make them modern games and still capture that magic that has made them, you know, some of the, you know, most lauded games of all time. But it wasn't. Nintendo just crapped out another port of these games like they do every few years, and it is just increasingly frustrating that they do that and they get away with it.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, man. I've always been of the opinion that like if you like, I did not know why people got excited about this.
Because we're suckers. That's what it is. That's what it comes down to. is we, like, they cash in on nostalgia of, like, you know, these being, you know, games that we grew up loving, and because Nintendo historically loves doing that, like putting shit in the vault kind of thing that Disney does. You know, people haven't had a chance to play some of these games for a while. Like Sunshine has not been really accessible since the GameCube, so people are getting to play that for the first time. Mario Galaxy isn't just locked behind a shitty console in the Wii, it's locked behind shitty controls because of the Wii. And that's the issue, that like Mario Galaxy, if it was just a regular like 2D or 3D platformer, could be a great game, but because it has those forced in motion controls from the Wiimotes and stuff that still exist in the game today, they actively make that game worse, and it's frustrating. But people, you know, buy into the Nintendo hype and buy these games, especially when they were like, hey, you're only going to be able to buy this until March. It's like I said when I tweeted out, I was like, maybe that's the right call, because this isn't worth selling past March. This isn't worth selling like now. But people buy it because Mario was our childhoods, so whatever. I'm feeling as frustrated with this game as I did with Crash when Crash came out. the Crash remasters came out, and I didn't have like any kind of nostalgia for Crash. Like I have nostalgia because I loved Mario 64 at the time, but it just doesn't hold up here in 2020. Like games have gotten better, and people are gonna be like, no, like Mario's still great, classic, blah blah blah. And I see it. I mean, I see it on my feed and stuff. And the reason I haven't like tweeted some of this out is because I'm just like, there's enough negativity in the world right now. I don't need to I don't need to add to that with like a hot take on Twitter or whatever. But I did need to get it off my chest here on in podcast form for the handful of people that might listen to this. I'm not having a fun time with it, and I won't because I won't even delve into like bad game versus good game. I am just not having fun with this. This is not a good time for me. If people are having a good time with it, cool, great. I hope I have explained why I am not, and why I wish this were a better experience, because it could be if Nintendo poured any kind of resources into it, but instead they just gave us pretty much emulated ports with the ability to play the music from the games. Cool, whoop-de-doo. Like any other company would be laughed off of the face of the industry for putting something this bad out, but whatever. Nintendo's gonna Nintendo. So let's wrap up then with let's talk about The Boys, because I've been watching the show. Have you been watching the show?
Yeah.
Or because you mentioned that you've definitely you've been a fan of the graphic novel
for years,
but I didn't know if you'd been watching the show.
Yeah,
okay.
no,
So yeah, we're like what, halfway through season 2 at this point now. I just kind of went through and binged the last. I basically binged all the episodes so far in the last couple days, to play catch up. So tell me about your thoughts on The Boys, Cam.
It's excellent. The trouble with the original comic is that it's extremely dated because at the time, Garth Ennis was trying to write a comic book that was contemporary for the time that he was living in. Garth Ennis is a phenomenal comic author. He wrote Preacher. He's written some really phenomenal comic books. But with The Boys, he wanted to write a comic book series that was contemporary for a post 9/11 world. And approaching superhero and celebrityism in a post 9/11 world. And the difference in this is not a spoiler for the show; it's a spoiler for the comic book. Which,
this is the 9/11 tie-in.
The 9/11.
Right? I only just found out about this yesterday when I was doing some reading.
The 9/11 tie-in was one of the planes in New York didn't hit the Twin Towers. It hit the I think it was the Washington Bridge.
Brooklyn Bridge.
There we go. It hit the Brooklyn Bridge, and both towers weren't hit. A lot of stuff happened differently, and it has to do with the way that basically the Seven, which is the Justice League of this world, went in and tried to pull some heroics, and it went terribly. And in response to that incident, the U.S. government realized that, which for the last 60 years, they'd let Vought Industries kind of run the superhero game so long as they didn't do one of two things: either involve themselves in military matters, and the second one is that they didn't involve themselves in law enforcement. So the comic books actually takes it a step farther. It's not just military stuff like it is in the show. It's also typical regular person law enforcement. So superheroes are really there for public incidents, public disasters, sort of stuff. So anything that the police would be involved in or the military would be involved in is a no-go for superheroes. And after 9/11, the government basically said we need to have some checks on these superheroes, so they created a unit, very much collectively called The Boys, which is what the comic is named after, which essentially would be a Black Ops unit that they would give a small dosage of Compound V, which is the thing that gives superheroes their powers in the show and the comic book, and essentially they would use Black Ops tactics to keep superheroes and Vought in check. And there's an entire like the setup of how the team works is different. They're always backed by the U.S. government, and the kind of nuances that happen as well as are very different because it's happening in a contemporary 2004 to 2010 era. So it's during the era of the Bush administration. It's during the height of the War on Terror. It is very much involved with like things like the NSA and like domestic surveillance, and it deals with a lot of stuff that were very topical at the time that never really were weren't going to be translated well in a 2018, 2019, 2020 world. So they've definitely done a lot to modernize it for the show. I think that Seth Rogen and Eric Kripke have done a phenomenal job in just like taking like Eric Kripke has as the showrunner is brilliant. For anybody who doesn't know, he is the original showrunner for Supernatural and the show creator for Supernatural. And the first 4 seasons he did are like really incredible television, period. But he's just such a brilliant showrunner, and he's so amazingly like smart about how he does things for his television shows to make them feel like they're really real lived-in world. And The Boys, I feel, really accomplishes that as a television show. I think that they made definitely the smarter moves on how to adapt it, and it goes to show that like it's really brilliant writing. Amazon really knocked it out of the park with their support on it, with like the budget that they gave it, and also picking up the kind of cast they did. Anthony Starr, who is Homelander, is incredible, and it's so funny because when you talk to him or you see interviews of him outside of the character, he is this like down to earth, really goofy kind of guy. But as Homelander, he's this just Jason Bateman, not Jason Bateman, Patrick Bateman. Thank you, Patrick Bateman type American Psycho. Type guy who's just, and it's brilliant. He's so good. He's so incredible as like this, because in the comic book, this is a plot point in the first episode of the first season. So this is like a slight spoiler if you haven't watched it. But in the show, it's just the Deep who sexually harasses Starlight. In the comic book, it's the Deep, Homelander, and Black Noir at the same time. Homelander is very much a despicable person from the get-go in the comic book. So you never get to see his kind of like reveal that he's actually like a not like good person at all. Like when the big shift from the comic book to the show is when Huey asks about Homelander, about any dirt on him. Butcher tells him, nah, he's squeaky clean. In the comic book, that's not the case. Homelander has one of the largest files in the comic book. It's so good. Like the comic book is really good, but at the same time, it's extremely dated because it's contemporary for the period that it was written in. But at the same time, it's incredible, like source material for a modern show. Especially with the way that superhero movies took off after.
Yeah.
Like after Iron Man in 2008, or was that 2007? When Iron Man came out.
Iron Man was 2008.
2008. Yeah. So in Iron Man coming out in 2008, creating kind of like the superhero genre as we now come to know it today.
I mean, it was like you had Iron Man and The Dark Knight came out in that same summer.
Yeah.
So like both Marvel and DC were like firing on all cylinders, and then obviously Marvel has just completely blown. I mean, like one of the things that I remember being like a fun talking point when The Boys season 1 came out was like they launched it basically like right after Comic-Con and right after Avengers Endgame was like had become like the biggest movie in the world or whatever. So it was like the meta commentary that it's making on celebrity and superheroes and like our adoration of them was like so pointed at, you know, like that was the conversation of the moment already. And it was just like a perfect timing kind of thing. And then it's interesting because I haven't read the comics, but the conversation that you're kind of having of like the comics are certainly like of their time a little bit, and this has done like a good job adapting him. I very much felt that way when I was reading Invincible recently.
Yeah,
because
that's a good point.
wrapped up not too long ago, and like I basically went in and read the entire series kind of like start to finish once the thing had already ended pretty much. And going back, you know, that's a series that had gone on since like 15 some odd years or something like that, because it would stop and start over its lifetime. And like the just like the blatant like homophobic kind of references early on in that series to like the best friend, you know, saying like, oh my god, this is so gay, in a very derogatory kind of sense. Like I appreciated like seeing those moments hit very differently reading them in 2018 2019 whenever I was doing that. And by the end of the run, they even like have a commentary back on itself of like, yeah, like when that character, you know, ends up being gay, I believe, you know, they kind of like have a little bit of a come to terms kind of like, let's deal with the fact that we used to talk like this and how dumb it was, that I found very like refreshing and appreciated, in kind of like the lifespan of that, seeing like the writing grow up with that series. Very much has me kind of feeling like, oh, we could probably see the same kind of thing when the Invincible adaptation, we start seeing that. But yeah, I mean, given what I know about the adaptation, I think I think The Boys is a great adaptation, and again, like really tackles and has a lot of fun, interesting things to say about like the current political landscape, the current celebrity landscape, and all that stuff, and it through the lens of like, yeah, what if, you know, Marvel Studios was real but also like made these superheroes and was, you know, was creating these superheroes. You know, what would that look like? Is a fascinating kind of look at that side of things.
I will also say that because of the time that we're talking about, you know, the contemporary time of 2000, like the, you know, the aughts as they are known as,
Stormfront was a little ahead of her time.
Stormfront was a guy in the comics, but yeah.
Okay.
And also, if you know, I'm not going to say anything about his the character in the comic books history, because I think that's going to be pulling, because of some recent episodes. I think they like that character. The 1-to-1 is not too far off, and it would definitely be considered spoilers for the rest of this upcoming season. So or like not even spoilers, but like pretty meaty spoiler predictions that like I don't want to put out there, because I want everybody to kind of experience it all together like we are right now. So I will say, however, that in the comics, because of like where it takes place of evangelical Christianity was at a way higher point, because it's before a lot of the scandals of like the mega church preachers started like coming out in like towards the end of the aughts and into the 20-teens, where like the height of Christianity, like the conservative Christian movement at its largest was during this era. And so it's very much a lot heavier, where, you know, in the show, like they go to one of these things and it's like there's some people there, you know, where if it was taking place during like the, you know, in the aughts, that would have been a way bigger festival. There would have been way more people there, and it would not have been considered quote unquote like niche like that. Like it's very much a, like, once again you're talking about the separation of the source material because it was contemporary for its times versus the show today where it's contemporary for our modern time. But like there's an AOC stand-in this season Trevor.
Yep. Yep.
Like there's a full on AOC stand-in, and like it's great. Uh,
It's I mean, like AOC is getting a lot of stand-ins. I remember when I watched Space Force a few months back. There's a very clearly AOC inspired character in that show too. So,
yep.
Yep. She's making waves. Good for AOC. Yeah, I was mentioning to you before we started recording. Like I went into the first episode of The Boys back when it came out, not knowing anything about it really. Like I hadn't seen anything, or I'd probably seen ads about it or something. But like they had very much just kind of like nothing. They had passed in one ear out the other, and it wasn't until people started being like, "Oh my God, The Boys is so good." So I ended up watching, I think, the series after it had fully released at the time. And so I dove into that first episode, and when Robin basically just gets liquefied right in like that opening scene, I was like, oh, okay, so this is the kind of show this is. I was not prepared for that. Now I need to like readjust what I'm thinking about with this show. And so I was mentioning before we started recording, like I'm not somebody that does excessive gore all that well. It's not. I mean, we obviously talked about Doom Eternal to start the show out, and even like Doom 2016. I didn't play Doom 2016 for a while when it came out because I was like, I don't really know if I want Doom. I grew up playing Doom, but that was when graphics were nowhere near as realistic as they are today. I don't know if I'm gonna want to do the glory kills and stuff in Doom, and so I kind of like I kept it at arm's length for a little bit, and I still very much feel that way in like a lot of TV and stuff. I just try to Tarantino is somebody that I've never really gotten into because I know like the bits of Tarantino I've seen really play up violence and excessive violence and stuff, and I'm just like, he can write the most clever stuff, but that's a turnoff for me. So I was mentioning like I go into every episode of The Boys and I read like a recap of it first, so I know what's coming. I don't care about spoiling myself for this show. I just don't want to, go into an episode and be watching it and suddenly somebody's head explodes and I just get traumatized by it because that's what would happen to me.
Because you're a normal person.
So this
Trevor.
is. Yeah, so this is very much one of those cases I touched on. I think on something a while back. I mentioned the idea of like I'm weird in that I will I will go out of my way to spoil myself on things sometimes because it alleviates the tension that I would otherwise be feeling. Another great example is I heard nothing but great things about Uncut Gems last year, but I also heard that it was an incredibly tense movie, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to go in and like read about what happens in this movie so that I'm not just a bundle of nerves for 2 hours and then the big tense moment happens and I like, because that's just not going to be a good time for me. So this is another one of those cases where it was like, this is one recently I did it with HBO's Watchmen, which was a phenomenal series, and it, for me at least, plays into that idea of like spoilers don't ruin the thing unless you've put so much stock into like that one big reveal or something like that being the where all of your joy is going to come from.
Yeah, like if
because
you're,
it
if
is,
you're all
for me
about
it
the
is
reveal.
storytelling is so much more like storytelling is much more the journey than the destination for me. So knowing what's coming doesn't make me like it less. It's seeing how they execute on that, even though I know it's coming, still makes it like a very compelling or a very interesting thing. And also recaps are never going to cover everything, obviously. So getting to see, in this last episode, for example, that came out, like A-Train's kind of like little speech in the movie within the show or whatever, was like a great moment that, I might have known was coming, but like it's still delivered incredibly well. It's very effective in the context of everything else we're seeing. So, I'm enjoying Boys, but it definitely is one that I kind of have to like, I have to not actively watch it because I won't do well with the gore and stuff. So it's something I have like on in the background or on off the side or something like that. And I can glance over if I want to like really kind of pay attention to a scene. But a lot of times I'll get to those scenes where it's like just bodily fluid noises or somebody's head is getting ripped off right now. And I'm like, I didn't even the noise. I didn't really need to hear that. It would have been really nice if I'd like turned the volume down on that or something right then and there. But I enjoy the kind of the larger commentary that it seems to have. I think it in this kind of like post Marvel world, post DCEU kind of world, it I think is an interesting approach that other shows like dabble with, like obviously like Watchmen was certainly another one of those, examining superheroes through a modern lens, and incredibly effectively. But like even something like the Umbrella Academy is this like, this take on what superheroes can be outside of the big two kind of pillars that we've known and had for many, many years in Marvel and DC. So I love, this approach to it in the same way we talked about when I talked about Harley Quinn on the show a few weeks back. Like I love that something like The Boys exists, but I love almost even more that like Harley Quinn is having that commentary and that conversation within the confines of the DC property itself. Is just a fun kind of extra level of things. And yay, Harley Quinn got picked up for season 3 for HBO Max. So I'm excited for more Harley Quinn eventually. But yeah, big fan of The Boys, even if I can't, just sit there and watch it start to finish always. But I'm glad you're enjoying it as a fan of the comic. I'm glad it hasn't like come in and like disappointed you or something like that.
No, especially with the cast that they have, I don't think that it could. I mean, just every single actor, every single person they have is just stellar, just knocking it out of the park. Whether it's like I mentioned earlier, Anthony Starr, who Anthony Starr steals every scene he's in because he's just
and
so good.
He's somebody I'd never heard of kind of going into that, and yeah, like it is absolutely a star-making kind of performance from him, and he just knocks everything out of the park in what he's doing, and making you like hate this character, but also like realize why he hasn't been hated, and why like he is charming to the public eye or whatever at the start of things and all that stuff. So
he does such a good job of making Homelander, the Superman-esque character, feel so real and so like, for somebody who's impervious, he does an amazing job at showing him frustrated and vulnerable. Like when he finds a situation that he can't laser eye beam his way out of, his frustration feels palpable and real. It's not like it's so good. And then every actor is phenomenal. Jack Quaid, talk about a star-making performance for him. He's like, he was doing like some minor stuff before in like a sketch comedy group on YouTube, and now he is like Petite Huey. He's Lil Huey, and he's so good. Jack Quaid is incredible. You have Carl Irving as Billy Butcher. Urban.
Urban.
I said Irving, didn't I? I've made that mistake before.
Yeah.
Carl Urban, who is Billy Butcher, who is a not like somewhat different, but at the same time still so incredibly good Billy Butcher. It's insane. And like the changes they've made to Billy Butcher's like reasoning and cause and like the things that he does is different. They didn't need to be that different, but I like that they did because it tied into some really cool stuff that they get to do now in this current season, and gives him like some motivation after the fact, and keeps him from big. Because in season 1 he goes like full like genocidal at the end towards Soups, and it's bad. Like it's really, really bad. Storytelling wise, it's perfect. It's the perfect way for his character to go out, and like makes total sense character wise for himself. But like it would not have been a good endpoint for season 1 or 2. Even though we haven't gotten to the end of season 2, like if they decide to go with that in a future storyline, that's way further down the line, and I don't even know if it actually will work for the world that they've built now, which is why I don't mind like saying it. It's such a like distinct, different kind of ending than what you would probably expect from the boys going forward, like lots of things would have to dramatically shift, and you'd forget that I ever mentioned it on this podcast. But um,
Yeah.
it's so like it's such a departure from a lot of like source material. Also, the fact that like they never give any of the boys Compound V. Um, Also, like Kimiko as is not her name in the comics. She's just known as the female. In the comics, like that's it. Like they all have like weird names, like the female butcher, um, mother's milk. For like
Hmm.
people who may not know this, mother's milk comes from like the fact like uh the fact that like his mother was like grossly mutated by Compound V and gave him Compound V from her breast milk. And he still like he and because of like his situation, he still has to drink it. So he's always drinking like so his mother's milk is his nickname because he's always drinking it. It's a very like different story because of that. Like that minor change they or major change. They don't give the boys Compound V specifically because that's not a thing. Like you don't give it to adults because when you give it to adults, it supercharges their abilities.
Hmm.
Like it's so brilliant. It's so well done. A Train, I love A Train's story in season 1 and 2, um, because especially in season 1, his storyline is so and how it ties into Huey's and it's brilliant. It's really well done. A Train's just like a one note. Like a lot of the seven are just like kind of one note hero, like one note characters. Even
Hmm.
Homelander is. There's really not a lot of depth to them, and the show's done a lot to give way more depth to it. In comparison, they also in the comic books there's a lot more organizations and teams that they don't really go into. Like there's an entire
Hmm.
X-Men franchise basically that is run by a pedophile, and like it's there's like it gets into like some of the darkest moments of the boys in the comics comes from like this part of the boys universe that like if they don't go into it at all in the show, I'm totally okay. Like I'm
Yeah.
okay. I don't need the show to get to that point where because I'm not even gonna say it on like on the podcast. Like and I don't even want to tell you about it, Trevor. It's like it's traumatic. Like it haunts me still.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Really brilliant writing. Like way to go show like the depths of depravity for Vought as a corporation. I think they've definitely done a better job in the show of doing it in less traumatic ways. Um, but also like I could totally see Mr. Edgar like pulling the trigger on something that I'm thinking of right now, and like making something happen. Like the show like Vought is so much like Vought is so much more evil in the comic books versus being so vapidly um like so vapidly vain and arrogant and like soulless as it is in the show. And I think like it's much more realistic if a company or a massive corporation is soulless than if it's quote unquote evil. Because in the comic books, a lot of times Vought just got to the point where it was almost cartoonishly evil,
Hmm.
and they've done such a great job of keeping it grounded in like it's about the money. Like they're in it for the money.
Exactly. It's yeah. When like when Robin dies, here's how much we're willing to give you because of we're sorry for your loss, and it's purely transactional. And that's what corporate America is these days. That's uh, going back. I'm thinking back to like a movie like Darkwater that I saw last year that is diving into the communities that are wrecked by chemical plant runoff and stuff like that, and those companies fighting tooth and nail to not give those people money and not take responsibility for that action. And eventually, when they do, it's like, okay, well, here's how much you're gonna get, and that just affects our bottom line, and it's
Yeah,
infuriating, but
it's never yeah
it's way too true to life, really.
yeah. Vought in the show is far more realistic. In the like because the reality is that Vought in the comic books is like I mentioned, it's cartoonishly to the point of how evil they are. Where the character who is Stillwell in the comics is male. He is such a like he is the soulless figure. He is like this figure that is considered soulless. He is never actively evil. He does some dark evil stuff, but at the same time, at the end of the day, it's like it's cleaning up messes, not really um, like it's not that like he's pursued it as like his goal for what he does, but at the end of the day, like Stillwell in the show is that same way, but now she's clearly a part of a machine that acts that same way. Versus Vought was very evil in the comic books, but it does it much better this way. Like I love all the characters, I love all the actors. My final note is just if you have Amazon Prime, there's no reason not to watch The Boys other than you just have zero interest in superhero. Even if you don't have an interest in superhero as a genre, this show is much more about causality and effect of a superhero world than I would say it's about superheroes themselves.
Yeah, I keep thinking about it in terms of like celebrity and whatnot, and I mean the I also I've mentioned them on the show before, but I'm a big fan of the Honest Trailers team over at Screen Junkies and Fandom, and they did a Boys season 1 kind of honest trailer recently, and they really kind of touch on the idea that like it's it's not like a power fantasy for us to like think about what would happen, you know, in Avengers Endgame or something like that. Like the fantasy is like not is overlooking that what would really happen is probably much more like what happens in The Boys, in that like power, just like it does everywhere else, corrupts. And so like you turn these people into the most powerful beings on the planet, and more often than not they're gonna have a screw loose, and they're gonna be more like Homelander than a Superman. So like yeah, it's a fascinating kind of a look at a lot of different areas, and obviously kind of the neo-Nazi elements that are being touched on in this season. You know, obviously very much kind of speaking to the times, really, and it's just like I wish this were more of an escape, and that we get some kind of like happy ending resolution out of it. But I also don't expect we will, because I'm just conditioned to think that from 2020 and what it has given us this year. So
and it's just how The Boys works. Like The Boys is The Boys is not a happy story.
Exactly. But like the what in one of the last episodes or whatever, like Butcher even says like, what, you expected a happy ending? that ain't this story, or something like that. But it's a great show, check it out. But yeah, other than that, I think that's gonna wrap up this week's episode. Ended up going longer than I was even anticipating, because I came into today, I was like, I don't really have too much to talk about.
Yeah. But, we're like
we had some good chats there.
We had literally like we both talked about it. We're like, we had like nothing's really happened recently. Well, we have some stuff we can talk about, but I don't think either of us expected a 2-hour podcast out of that.
Yeah, nope. But there we are. So that is going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you for joining me, Cam. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot on Twitter. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Cam?
Not really a shout out, right? Actually, there is a massive shout out I want to give out to a couple of people. I want to give a shout out to Andy Cortez and Snowbike Mike. They like in the last few days, I felt really like I've been watching their streams. Mike had me on his when he did an Among Us with some people. I was on there, so if there's a VOD up for that, you can go check me out playing with Snowbike Mike and a lot of the best friends from Mike's crew. I will say, if you ever play Among Us, if Mike is not outright just accusing random people, he is 100% the killer, and he is the worst accomplice of all time. The worst accomplice, because people will just be able to spot out that he's the imposter. And and he will also turn on you on a dime. He will not back you up. I barely got out of if it was plausible deniability that he was able to use to like help me get out of a tough spot once. But outside of that, he was like ready to turn on me, and I was like, what? Because that's the way he works. Like if he's not accusing people, people will assume that he's the imposter because they're right.
Yeah. I have not played Among Us myself yet, but I've caught a few streams of it, and in particular, there was a What's Good Patreon stream that was going on yesterday, and Andrea was playing, or like the What's Good ladies were playing with some of the people in their community and stuff, and for one of the games, Andrea and our friend Lauren were the imposters, and it was the first time I'd ever seen the a body got found or something like that, and a meeting gets called, and somebody says, so I was just in this room with Beasley, so I think she's okay, and Andrea like jumped on it before she could even say, or before they could even say, like, so I think she's okay, I think she's in the clear, I think, like, I don't think anything bad about that, and basically threw Beasley under the bus immediately. I was like, that's a weird strategy to be throwing your other imposter under the bus with you. And then like like Lauren was able to kind of like explain her way out of it, but I was like, that's weird. And then and they basically were able to like skip that round or whatever. And then, like, the next round, Lauren threw Andrea under the bus immediately. And I think Andrea ended up getting ejected, rightly so, as the imposter. But I think because Lauren had kind of, like, thrown everybody off the scent, she was able to get away with it. And they ended up winning because she was able to
That
go
is
off and
that is a
kill
definite
everybody else.
strategy I've seen people utilize.
Yeah.
But it usually takes coordination and like talking to each other.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Not what these two were doing.
Yeah, no. It's no. That is actually like I love Among Us. It's not a game that I want to play all the time.
Mm-hmm.
My brother-in-law and my sister especially, she plays it on her. So because my PC's down, I'm playing it on my phone. And when I told my sister that you could play it on your phone, she goes, "Oh, okay." And like the three of us played like with some of my brother-in-law's friends, and we had a great time. Whenever I see my sister, she has her phone, and I'm looking at her, and she's playing it with just random people.
Yeah.
Like my sister is obsessed with Among Us right now. Shout out to Among Us. What a comeback for a game. Like just.
Yeah, coming out of nowhere, having been around since 2018, and then just, like in the last few months, just skyrocketing.
It's just one of those quarantine things where it's like, hey, what's a good game that you can play with a bunch of people? Oh, Among Us, okay. And
yeah. I mean, it's like, it definitely gives me those Secret Hitler vibes that we played at Extra Life a few years back.
The one where Jacob Bryant, shout out to Jacob Bryant, basically Kobeing a shot right onto Hitler. Were you playing that game with us, or were you talking about I think you played a different round of the game. Oh wait, which Extra Life are we talking about?
I mean, I'm talking the one at Alex's place, and this I'm talking specifically like because I didn't play Secret Hitler or whatever like on stream. I'm talking either like the day after the stream or something, or maybe it was even before the stream. But like we all just kind of like were sitting there in the living room playing.
Okay, yeah, no. This is when a bunch of us were drunk, and we were playing drunk Secret Hitler, and Jacob Bryant, outright like, no, this is actually like a fun memory of Justin too. Justin and I we were fascists, Justin and I, and Justin was Hitler, and in like the second or third round, like Jacob goes, "I know who Hitler is. I'm gonna write it down on my phone." And then later on, he's like, "Somebody give me the gun. Like, I'll make me the Chancellor next. Give me the gun, and I will shoot Hitler in the face." And he straight up did it. And then we're like, "What? How did you get it?" And he goes, "Look at my phone, Cameron." And I look at his phone. I'm like, he figured it out. Like second round. Jacob Bryant's a pro, but only when drunk. Yeah,
there you go.
Shout out to that guy.
That is the most Jacob Bryant statement I've ever heard.
Love that guy. Oh, I've missed him so much. I haven't seen him in years. I miss him so much.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Shout out to Snowbike Mike and Andy. Certainly, I will echo those. You can follow me at Trevor J Starkey on Twitter. I listened to this week's XCast yesterday, and then I like hopped into Mike's Fall Guys stream after that. And like I hopped in and he picked up a win, and I was like, good for you, man. He was playing with Gary Whitta and stuff. So yeah, shout out to Mike. I'm glad. I'm so glad of the success he's finding with the XCast, and he's killing it. He's knocking it out the park.
Commit yourself to greatness. That's what he says.
Yeah. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or check out thatnerdysite.com for all the latest content from us. If you liked what you heard, once again, you can please rate, review, like, and subscribe. Maybe even consider supporting us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, where every patron gets early access to a monthly bonus episode of this very show. Thank you, as always, for listening, and as always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.